Zara Knox crouched by the shattered console, her fingers running over the scorched metal, trying to make sense of the damage. The station groaned around her, the low hum of failing systems a constant reminder of how alone she was. Her heart hammered in her chest, the weight of the silence pressing in on her. There were no other voices, no help on the way. Just her and the cold, desolate station. She wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, ignoring the burning ache in her muscles. The last few days had blurred together, a nightmare of repairs and rationed water. She had managed to get life support systems back online, but barely. The temperature fluctuated wildly, swinging from freezing cold to sweltering heat. Every step was a battle against the unrelenting decay of the station. She didn't know how much longer she could keep this up, but there was no choice. Zara had never imagined she would end up here, stranded on an abandoned station at the edge of the galaxy. Her mission had been simple enough: deliver some supplies to an old research outpost. The last thing she remembered before the crash was the explosion. A flash of light, the scream of alarms, and then the chaos. When her ship had spiraled toward the station, and the crash forced her to abandon the cockpit, she'd found herself here, alone in a derelict place with only a few damaged systems to keep her alive. Come on, she muttered to herself, pressing a few buttons on the console and watching the flickering screen. The communication array wasn't responding again. The distress signal she'd sent out had been ignored, as had every other attempt. The alien races who had once populated this station, whom Zara knew nothing about, had clearly abandoned it long ago. Her fingers hovered over the panel, unsure of where to turn next. She needed a breakthrough, something, anything to get the station running at full capacity again. A faint crackling noise made her freeze. The static intensified, filling the silence in an eerie hum. Zara's pulse quickened as she scrambled to reconfigure the transmission equipment. Was it a signal? Someone had to have heard her distress beacon. She listened closely as strange, distorted words began to form, though the language was foreign to her. Falling. Beyond. The transmission cut out, leaving nothing but static. She leaned closer to the screen, her breath catching. The voice, if it could be called that, sounded urgent, terrified even. Whoever, or whatever, had sent it had been in the middle of something important, something she didn't understand. A warning, perhaps. Zara's eyes narrowed. There was no one else here. No one left to warn her. She was truly on her own. But the transmission. Could it be an answer? A sign that someone, something, was still out there. Before she could react, a flash of light illuminated the walls around her. Zara jerked back, heart pounding as an unexpected power surge coursed through the station. The lights flickered, and the hum grew louder, more insistent, as if the station itself was waking up. And then there was a sound that she'd never heard before. Something alien, something dangerous. The walls shuddered. The station wasn't as empty as she thought. Zara stumbled back, instinctively reaching for the nearest support as the station's walls groaned under the sudden power surge. The lights flickered erratically, casting long, distorted shadows across the decaying corridors. A deep mechanical hum began to echo through the halls, vibrating the floor beneath her boots. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. Whatever had caused the surge wasn't a malfunction. It was deliberate. Her eyes darted to the control panel, where the communication array had finally powered up, displaying a series of alien symbols she didn't recognize. The transmission had shifted too, now a chaotic mess of symbols and signals she couldn't decode. But among the madness, a single word stood out: activate. Zara hesitated. She had no idea what she was dealing with, alien technology far beyond her understanding. But if it was a clue, a hint that could help her escape this place, she had no choice but to follow it. It was the first sign of life, the first signal that she wasn't truly alone. Moving cautiously, she pressed the activation sequence, her fingers trembling as she input the alien command. The station rumbled again, and the lights flared brightly for a brief moment before settling into a steady glow. At the far end of the hallway, an ancient door, which Zara hadn't seen before, slid open with a logus. A blast of cold air hit her as she stepped into the darkened room, the smell of dust and rust heavy in the stale atmosphere. The door sealed behind her, leaving Zara standing in a space that felt ancient and untouched by time. The walls here were etched with strange, flowing symbols, almost like a script, but the artistry of it was beyond her comprehension. In the center of the room, resting on a stone pedestal, was a device, an artifact, its surface glimmering with an eerie light. It was a strange mix of organic and technological design, like something both alive and mechanical. The moment her gaze fixed upon it, a pulse of energy shot through her, brief but powerful. She staggered back, gripping the side of the pedestal to steady herself. And then the pulse intensified, flooding her senses. Zara gasped, her mind suddenly overwhelmed with an influx of knowledge and sensations that were not her own. Alien data flooded her consciousness in waves. Languages, star maps, equations far beyond the understanding of humanity. And for a moment, her thoughts were scattered, unable to process it all. The world around her spun, and she felt a strange tug, as though her very being was being pulled into the device, as if it were alive and calling to her. She jerked away, trying to break the connection, but it was too late. The device had already bonded to her. Somehow, it had fused with her neural system. Her fingers twitched involuntarily, moving across the walls of the chamber as if the information was now embedded in her muscle memory. Her breath quickened as the knowledge settled, a perfect blend of human and alien understanding. She could feel the power coursing through her, the hum of energy vibrating inside her bones. It was intoxicating, overwhelming. And then, with a sudden surge, Zora's vision cleared. She could see the station now, not just as a crumbling wreck, but as a fully integrated, functional system. The heart of the station, its core, was within reach, its systems alive in a way they hadn't been for centuries. But the deeper she probed, the more she realized. This artifact was not a gift. It was a key, and it had been waiting for someone to awaken it. Zara's hands shook as she let out a breath. She hadn't just activated the station's technology. She had become its conduit. And somewhere, in the darkness beyond the station, something ancient and dangerous was watching. Zara's mind raced as the alien artifact thrummed against her consciousness. Her breath came in shallow bursts as the flood of knowledge settled into her brain, pulling her into a strange state of heightened awareness. The walls of the chamber around her were no longer just walls. They were an extension of the station's systems, alive and pulsating with energy. The design of the station, once chaotic and fragmented in her mind, now seemed clear, interconnected, as if the entire structure had been built with a singular purpose. That purpose was unsettling. She staggered back from the pedestal, feeling a wave of dizziness overtake her. What did I just do? Her fingers brushed against the console again, this time instinctively, as if the data were embedded within her muscles. The room hummed louder, and a holographic map flickered into existence before her eyes. She recognized constellations, stars she had studied before, but these were far older, mapping out systems Zara didn't even know existed. But the map wasn't the most terrifying thing. It was the single, pulsating point of red at the very core of the station. The singularity. The reason this station had been abandoned. Her eyes widened. No. She had heard about supermassive anomalies in the outer rim, the kind of cosmic events that swallowed entire stars, but never in her wildest dreams had she thought she would come across one firsthand. The singularity was no ordinary black hole. It was an engineered device, its massive energy drawn and funneled by the station's core. What the Vrath, the aliens who had built this place, had intended to use as a source of power had instead become a ticking time bomb. Before she could fully process the implications, the station's automated systems flared to life, overriding her input. A voice, cold and mechanical, echoed in the chamber. Warning. System corruption detected. Immediate evacuation required. The anomaly will collapse in 72 hours. Zara's pulse quickened. She had to do something. She had to fix this. But how? The singularity had been the result of the Vrath's reckless experimentation with quantum manipulation. This station, in all its complexity, was a trap set long ago. The creators were long gone, leaving behind only a dead husk of a place that had once been a hub of exploration and knowledge. A flicker on the console caught her attention. It was an encrypted message buried deep within the station's archives, older than anything she had found so far. With a steadying breath, Zara hacked into the encrypted data, her fingers moving almost of their own accord. The transmission decrypted in seconds. The voice that emerged from the speaker was faint but unmistakable. We thought we could control it, but the technology, it changes you. We failed. The voice belonged to one of the Vrath, a researcher trapped in the final moments before their demise. Zara could hear the terror in the words, the panic that had gripped them as they realized they were too late. Her fingers froze as the final words echoed, a warning buried within the garbled static. The artifact. It will bond with the one who activates it. Beware the change. There is no going back. Zara's stomach twisted in knots. Her eyes darted to her own hands, now trembling slightly. The artifact had done something to her, something beyond her understanding. Her mind raced through the possibilities, and she felt a sickening chill of realization. She wasn't just repairing the station anymore. She was becoming part of it. And whatever the Vrath had been running from, it was now coming for her. Zara's heart pounded in her chest as the words from the Vrath researcher echoed in her mind. There is no going back. The artifact had bonded with her, and the realization hit her like a cold wave. Her body no longer felt like her own, like the boundaries between herself and the station were beginning to blur. She stumbled backward, her hand brushing against the console again. And this time, the station's systems responded to her touch before she could even think. The lights across the hall flickered back to life, the hum of the ventilation systems growing louder, more efficient. She felt the pull, the deep, overwhelming urge to delve deeper into the station's systems. It was as though the technology and her body were in sync, intertwined in a way that transcended simple engineering. But Zara's mind was still her own, mostly. Focus, she muttered, shaking her head to clear the fog. This power, whatever it was a gift and a curse. If she didn't stay in control, she might very well become like the Vrath, a slave to the station, to the singularity, to the very technology she was now connected with. Before she could consider her next move, the station's control systems flashed again. The alert on the console had changed. A fleet of ships was approaching. Her eyes widened as the identification codes on the screen confirmed her fear. The Vrath. They were coming. And if they reached the station, they would reclaim the artifact, likely with a far more sinister purpose in mind. Zara cursed under her breath. She was now their only obstacle, and the station was her only weapon. She bolted from the chamber, adrenaline pumping through her veins. The hallways, once disorienting and vast, now felt different. She moved swiftly, almost instinctively, as if the station itself was guiding her. The walls pulsed faintly in response to her every step, and she realized that her connection to the technology was stronger than she had ever imagined. She was not just repairing the station, she was becoming it. The corridors led her to the central hub, the heart of the station, where she could see the first signs of the Vrath's advance. Their ships loomed large in the station's external docking bay, silhouettes against the backdrop of deep space. She could see their weapons powering up, their presence causing the station's already unstable systems to flare and glitch. I need to stop them. Zara's mind raced. The systems could be her advantage. Her hand hovered over a series of controls as her thoughts flickered through every possible defense mechanism the station had. But she didn't have much time. The Vrath ships would breach the station's defenses within hours. With a determined breath, she reached out, connecting to the station's weapon systems. Her fingers moved with precision, almost without thought, as she engaged the automated defense drones. The station's external weapons platforms, large, turbolaser-like cannons designed for deep space, came to life with a low, menacing hum. The drones deployed, their sleek, spider-like forms skittering across the station's exterior, priming for battle. Zara could feel them, feel their movements as if they were extensions of herself. But even with the station's weapons at her command, she knew it wasn't enough. The Vrath were far more powerful than any automated defense. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, she realized that she wasn't just an engineer anymore. She had become something else, something far more dangerous. The artifact had given her power, and now Zara was going to use it. With a silent, determined promise to herself, Zara prepared for the fight of her life. If the Vrath wanted the station, they would have to face its new protector, human and alien, a force neither side could predict. The hum of the station's weapon systems filled Zara's ears as she stood before the massive viewport, watching the Vrath ships approach. Each vessel was sleek and formidable, built for both speed and firepower. The ships were bristling with weaponry, and Zara knew the time to act was now. She felt the alien energy coursing through her, her connection to the station stronger than ever. The knowledge of how to control its systems, its weapons, had been burned into her mind by the artifact. She could feel the drones outside, their mechanical bodies moving with fluidity as if they were extensions of herself. She could see their every move, anticipate their next action, as easily as breathing. Her fingers twitched in response to the instinctual pull of the station's control systems. Zara's thoughts merged with the station's weapons array, and with a subtle movement of her hand, she activated the first defense mechanism. The station's massive turbolasers shifted into position, their targeting systems locking onto the incoming Vrath fleet. Zara inhaled deeply, steadying herself. The artifact had given her the power to control this place, but it hadn't come without a price. Her body felt different. The lines between her humanity and the station's vast, sentient network were blurring. She could feel the systems humming within her, the low pulse of the singularity at the heart of the station, urging her to embrace the alien technology completely. She resisted, for now. The first Vrath ship entered the station's firing range, and Zara didn't hesitate. With a flick of her wrist, the station's cannons unleashed a barrage of fire, the beams slicing through the vacuum of space. The Vrath ship erupted in a flash of light, the explosion lighting up the dark expanse of space like a dying star. Zara's breath caught in her throat. She had done that. Her mind had guided the weapons, her connection to the station allowing her to strike with precision and power. But before she could process the victory, the remaining Vrath ships retaliated, their weapons turning toward the station with deadly intent. Warning, the station's AI announced coldly. External damage detected. Shields at 40% capacity. The ship's shields flickered, and Zara could feel the strain, the heat building up as the Vrath's fire raked across the station's outer hull. But she was ready. She raised her hand again, and this time, she didn't just command the drones or the turbolasers. She tapped into the station's core, into the singularity itself. A surge of energy shot through her, the power of the anomaly flooding her senses, filling her with a surge of strength unlike anything she had ever known. The station's core vibrated beneath her feet, and she could feel the tension of the black hole being pulled into her control. With a mental snap, she unleashed the full force of the core's energy. A massive wave of gravitational force radiated outward, pulling at the Vrath ships. They struggled against it, but the pull was irresistible. The force twisted their hulls, bending them out of shape as the singularity's power began to distort space around them. The first ship buckled and tore apart, its structural integrity crushed by the gravity. The second ship followed, its engines overwhelmed by the crushing force. The third ship tried to flee, but it was too late. Zara willed the gravity to pull it back, and with a final surge, it was consumed, vanishing into the distortion. The station stood still in the aftermath, its systems humming, its defenses victorious. Zara's breathing was heavy, her hands trembling. She could feel the artifact within her, its power surging in time with her heartbeat. But the battle wasn't over. Not yet. There were more Vrath out there, more ships, more of the strange alien species she didn't fully understand. They would come back. They would want the artifact, the station, the power she now held. And if Zara was to survive, she would need to embrace that power even more fully. No turning back. The question now wasn't whether she could stop the Vrath. It was whether she could control the very thing inside her that was starting to consume her. Zara stood amidst the quiet aftermath of the battle, the eerie silence of the station settling over her like a heavy blanket. The Vrath ships were destroyed, their shattered remnants drifting in space, leaving only the faintest traces of the fire they had once spewed. The station's systems hummed around her, calm for now, but Zara knew better than to think the danger had passed. She could still feel the pull of the singularity at the heart of the station, its immense gravitational force tugging at her, urging her to draw from it once again. The artifact's power surged through her veins, the energy intoxicating and addictive. It whispered to her, promising greater control, promising more strength. But she could feel the cost, too. It wasn't just the station's systems she had intertwined herself with. It was the very heart of the singularity itself. She had become part of it. Her body still felt off. Her skin was tingling, as though her cells had been altered by the very energy she had channeled. Her senses were heightened, but not just in the usual way. She could now feel the station's pulse, its life force, as though it were her own. And worse, she could feel the dark, endless pull of the singularity, its gravitational force seeping into her thoughts, trying to overwhelm her mind. Zara took a deep breath, fighting the rising panic. She needed to stay focused. There was still the matter of the Vrath. They wouldn't stop coming after the artifact. And they had more ships, more firepower than she could handle alone. Think, Zara, think. She walked briskly to the command center, her steps echoing in the hollow, vast space. The station had many secrets, and she had just uncovered the most dangerous one. There was more to this place than just a failed experiment. It was a weapon of unimaginable power, designed by the Vrath, and it had been waiting for someone to activate it. And now she was that someone. A holographic interface flickered to life as she approached, the station's AI greeting her with its usual cold efficiency. Systems stable, threats eliminated, new fleet detected at the edge of the system. Zara's chest tightened. The fleet was already on its way. They had regrouped, and they were coming in force. If she didn't act quickly, they would overwhelm the station, and they would take control of the singularity. She couldn't let that happen. I have to destroy it, she thought. Destroy the core. Shut it all down before they can use it. Her hand hovered over the console, her fingers trembling with the weight of her decision. She had the power to do it. She could initiate the core's self-destruct sequence, trigger a chain reaction that would tear the station apart and neutralize the singularity forever. It was a desperate move, and it would cost her the only advantage she had. But then, the voice of the station's AI interrupted her thoughts. Warning. Core destabilization will result in immediate destruction of station. Evacuation is not possible. Are you sure you want to proceed? The words hit her like a blow to the gut. She had no choice. The Vrath were relentless. The power of the singularity was too great to be allowed to fall into their hands. Zara clenched her fist, the power of the station thrumming through her, urging her to stop, to embrace it. But she knew the truth now. There was no turning back. With a single final motion, she initiated the self-destruct sequence, sealing her fate. As the countdown began, Zara could feel the artifact inside her thrumming louder, the station itself reacting to her decision. It didn't want to die. It didn't want to let her go. But Zara had already made her choice. The Vrath wouldn't take this station. not while she still drew breath. The countdown began with a low, ominous hum, reverberating through the walls of the station. Core self-destruct sequence initiated. 60 minutes to detonation. The AI's voice was mechanical, but its words seemed to carry a sense of finality. Zara stood frozen, her hand still hovering over the control panel, feeling the weight of the decision pressed down on her chest. She had initiated the sequence, but she didn't know if she could carry it through. The power of the singularity inside her fought against it, an alien force pushing at her thoughts, urging her to stop. You are the key now. You cannot destroy what you have become. You cannot destroy me. The voice was not hers, not quite, but it was familiar, an imprint of the artifact, of the station itself. It resonated in her very soul, pulling at her with promises of unimaginable power. But Zara had already made her choice. The Vrath would never control this place. She could feel their fleet on the horizon, the ominous approach of warships that could end her fight in an instant. And if the station remained, if the singularity remained, they would take it all. They would use its power to crush everything in their path. She moved quickly, every instinct screaming at her to act faster. The singularity's pull was stronger now, its power a constant presence in her mind. She could feel it seeping into her thoughts, urging her to give in, to become part of the station completely. It was seductive, a promise of strength, but Zara refused to be consumed. Her hands moved almost of their own accord, touching various consoles around the command center, activating the final stages of the self-destruct sequence. The holographic displays showed the countdown ticking away in real time. 50 minutes. 45 minutes. Don't look back, Zara thought, pushing away the overwhelming feeling of power that threatened to swallow her whole. The station's systems were alive now, connected to her, intertwined in ways that went beyond comprehension. It was as though she could feel the heartbeat of the station in her own chest. Every pulse of energy was an extension of her own heartbeat, every tremor of the singularity a part of her being. But there was no time to marvel at what she had become. With the station's core on the verge of collapsing, Zara knew she had to defend it. She was its last line of defense. The Vrath would try to stop her, to take control of the station before the detonation. She could see their ships now, their weapon systems locked on, ready to destroy her, and the station in one final strike. A cold fury rose within her, and Zara reached out with her mind, tapping into the full breadth of the station's power. She felt it surge through her like an electric current. The drones, the weapons platforms, the station's external defenses, they all responded to her command. As the Vrath ships neared, Zara's mind pulsed with the energy of the singularity, and she unleashed it. A wave of gravitational force rippled outward from the station, distorting space itself, drawing the ships toward the event horizon. The first ship buckled under the immense pressure, its engines failing as it was pulled into the singularity's orbit. The second ship followed, its hull cracking under the strain of the gravitational pull, and the third ship tried to escape, only to be caught in the same inescapable grasp. Zara's breath quickened, but she couldn't stop now. She felt the station's core singing, its pulse rising, and with it, the Vrath fleet began to vanish, one ship after another, consumed by the relentless pull of the singularity. They were being dragged toward the event horizon, their fate sealed. She had done it. She had saved the station. But as the last ship disappeared into the abyss, the power of the singularity surged again, more violently this time. The station shook, and Zara's vision blurred. She had used too much of its power. She could feel her body struggling to keep up with the energy coursing through her. She was no longer just a human engineer. She had become something else entirely, part human, part alien, part station. And now, as the countdown continued, the real question was not whether the station would survive, but whether Zara herself would. 10, 9. The AI counted down, oblivious to the chaos she had unleashed. Zara took a final, steadying breath. There was no going back now. She was in this until the very end. The countdown echoed through the command center, each number like a drumbeat signaling the end. 5, 4. Zora could feel the pull of the singularity growing stronger, the energy within her surging in response to the countdown. It wasn't just the station's destruction she was about to witness. It was the culmination of everything she had become. The power of the artifact, the station, and the singularity had fused with her, and now there was no separating them. She could feel every heartbeat of the station, every pulse of the anomaly, as if they were one. But despite the immense power surging through her, a strange calm had descended over Zora. She had already made her choice. The Vrath were gone. The station was safe, at least for now. The singularity would collapse, and it would take everything with it. The power, the threat, all of it would be erased, leaving only empty space behind. Her fingers hovered over the final sequence to trigger the core's self-destruct. The destruction would be absolute. There was no way for the station to survive this. The anomaly would collapse in on itself, and everything in its vicinity would be pulled into the void, erased in an instant. 3, 2. Zora's mind flashed back to the moment she had first activated the artifact, when she had felt the strange merging of herself with the station. She had never truly understood what the Vrath had done, how they had created something that could alter the fabric of space itself. They had intended to use it as a weapon, but it had become something else entirely. Something more. The station itself was an extension of her now. It was part of her. She was part of it. She could feel the station's voice, faint yet clear. You have chosen. The anomaly will collapse. You will not survive this. Zora's chest tightened, but she didn't hesitate. She couldn't. The Vrath had been driven by greed, by a hunger for control. She was different. She had been given a gift, perhaps a curse, but it was one she would use to protect those who didn't have the power to defend themselves. 1. In the final moments, Zora didn't look back. She knew the station, the singularity, the power she had unlocked. None of it would last. But it didn't matter. She had become something far greater than she could have ever imagined, and the choice to end it was her own. With a final press of a button, the station's core detonated. There was a moment of absolute stillness. Silence, like a breath held in time. Then, everything shifted. The singularity imploded. The station shuddered, its vast corridors twisting, its very structure bending under the immense gravity. The energy that had once been contained was now unleashed, pulling everything in its path into the heart of the black hole. The walls, the floors, the machinery, all of it was consumed in an instant, vanishing into nothing. Zora's body was weightless as the gravitational pull intensified. She felt herself being drawn toward the singularity, her connection to the station a final tether that could not hold. There was no escaping it. And then, in the final, blinding flash of light, the station and everything within it was gone. The void swallowed all. But as the darkness of the singularity consumed her, Zora felt a strange peace. She had done what she needed to do. She had stopped the Vrath. She had protected the galaxy from the dangers of the artifact. And now she would become part of the very thing she had feared, the void itself. But in the darkness, there was no fear, only the quiet echo of a human heart, beating one last time, as it merged with the eternal silence of space. And so Zora's story ended, not with destruction, but with sacrifice. A human engineer, who had once been forgotten and alone, had transformed not just a station, but the fate of the universe itself.